And in every moment, I try to be myself. And that is the example they should take after. Even if you're different, you have a different background, not an easy, let's say, environment, you can still make it. Whatever you do, you can still make it. And I am a living example on that.
From a kid from the blocks to a superstar on the pitch, Zlatan Ibrahimovic has always remained the same. Born in Sweden to immigrant parents, he had a lot of difficulty fitting in with his classmates. Insulted, mocked. Despite all this, Ibra never hid his origins. Before becoming a great footballer, he grew up in poverty and witnessed firsthand his father's alcoholism. But all these challenges helped him grow and develop an incredible strength of character. Nowadays, and for many years, he's been one of the best goal scorers in history. Here's how this kid from Rosengard became the Zlatan we all know today. To get to know Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you first have to know about his family's background. Everything started in 1977 in Yugoslavia. In the preceding years, the country's economic and political situation had become very tense. For some communities, life was becoming more and more difficult. It's for this reason that Šefik Ibrahimovic, a Bosnian of Muslim faith, decided to move to Sweden. At the same time, Jurka Gravic, a Croatian Catholic, made the same journey. When the pair met in Malmö, it was love at first sight. Following their marriage, Zlatan was born on October 3, 1981. Šefik and Jurka saw him as a promise for happiness. That's why they gave him his name, because Zlatan means golden in Serbo-Croatian. But life doesn't always go to plan. When he was just 2 years old, his parents divorced. From then on, he lived with his mother in a deprived area of Rosengard. The majority of the people living there came from migrant backgrounds. Where I came from, there were a lot of foreigners. They put a lot of foreigners in one area, and that place is called Rosengard, but they say it's ghetto. For me, it was paradise because that is where I came from. That is where I learned and where I grew up. Zlatan made up part of this mix of cultures and loved it. Everyone spoke to each other and knew each other in the neighborhood. There were no barriers. Despite occasional beatings and getting hit by his mother's wooden spoon, he wasn't an unhappy kid. Quite the opposite. He took inspiration from what he saw around him to build his character. Because in this environment, you have to do everything you can to establish yourself and earn respect. Only the strong survive. While there was mutual respect, there was also a lot of individualism. In this area, you needed to be tough. When there was food on the table, you didn't wait until everybody had food and then take some. No, you took it whenever you could. While there was food, we were taking it. When it was finished, it was finished. Zlatan never had a full stomach. Sometimes he'd go 2 whole days without a meal. To provide for the needs of her household, the boy's mother worked 14 hours a day. But even with these kind of sacrifices, it wasn't enough. And one day, things took a heartbreaking turn. When he was just 10 years old, social services took him away from his mother. It was Šefik, his father, who took over looking after the child. In reality, he wasn't really able to provide his son with an appropriate education either. He'd been an alcoholic for some time now, in particular because of the war in Yugoslavia. Powerless to help, he learned of the deaths of many of his family members who stayed in the country. His personal situation broke down, just like the situation in his homeland. But through all this, little Zlatan carried some hope. At school, Zlatan was hardly the top pupil, but he was also far from being the least intelligent. He excelled in 2 subjects in particular, English and physical education. Only this wasn't enough to hide his behavior as an unruly child. Social services decided to assign him a personal classroom aide who followed him wherever he went. The kid didn't agree with this approach, so he did everything he could to escape her. He used a not particularly subtle method, but it worked. During a hockey game, he hit a puck into the face of the classroom assistant. Following this incident, Šefik was told he should take his son to see a psychiatrist. This was out of the question for his father. "Who are you? You should all be sent to an asylum. My son doesn't have any problems. He's the best." He might not have been the best father on the planet, but Šefik was still proud of his son. And he proved that perfectly one particular moment in the kid's life. Do you remember we were talking about hope? That the little boy would bring happiness to his family? To do that, we have to focus on the field that would make him famous: football. Zlatan played his first minutes at small local clubs when he was 6. But he found integrating into these teams particularly difficult. Ibra is Swedish, but his parents weren't from the country. He didn't fit in with a Nordic stereotype, whether that be his appearance or his surname, the difference in treatment that the striker always hated. When I started in Malmö, I was not accepted like everybody else, because I was Ibrahimovic. I was not Andersson. I was not Svensson. All these typical Swedish names. I was a foreigner, but that wasn't the only problem he encountered on his rise. One day, a teammate tackled him at training and Ibra responded by punching him. The player's father was a police officer. He sent a letter to the club signed by some of the players asking for Zlatan to be kicked out. The worst part of this story is that he didn't even know about it. When he found out, he felt rejected, like a black sheep. Despite his talent, the young man's personality and attitude annoyed people. But through his upbringing, he'd learned to be an island. The criticism passed right over his head. It's thanks to this that he managed to succeed in the very exclusive world of professional football. In his formative years in Malmö, Zlatan didn't have any money. You had to pay to compete in big tournaments. At that moment, the kid thought about giving it all up. But his father pushed him to follow his dream thanks to a huge sacrifice. Instead of paying his rent, Šefik gave his son the money so he could play in his tournament. The following month, he had to pay 2 months' worth of rent. But this act motivated Zlatan even more. And at 17 years old, he signed his first professional contract with Malmö. The bet paid off. The teen was soon scoring goal after goal. But in the media and in the locker room, the criticism was non-stop. Zlatan is selfish. He's arrogant. He's an unpolished diamond. Maybe, maybe not. Rosengard had forged him into a very tough kid mentally, who was very self-assured. In 2001, he became the most expensive player ever sold by Malmö, $9.5 million, and this is still the record 20 years later. Many people thought this transfer would bring Ibra back down to earth, but he actually just got even better. His accolades and his 500 career goals clearly speak for themselves. FC Barcelona, Inter, AC Milan, Paris. The Swede established himself in the biggest leagues in Europe. His comments often earned him a lot of coverage from the press.
I came like a king and left like a legend.
But the people who knew the player knew that he wasn't arrogant or disrespectful. For him, it's a trap the journalists fall into head first. I know how it works. If they don't have what they want, they go crazy. They can write all they want about me. I don't care. They need me to sell, but I don't need them. Since he was a kid, Zlatan was judged and criticized for his unusual personality. But it was normal where he grew up to behave like that, sometimes even necessary. He experienced real struggles before all this glory. He used his childhood in Rosengard to guide him. Ibra had to behave like a lone wolf. And it paid off. He's just as good at 39 as he was at 25. So, keep fighting and never give up when you're criticized. Use all this fuel to make your dreams come true. And never forget that you are the sole master of your success.